You're told you've been selected for a military research program. You're given a uniform. You enter a secure facility. Doctors are waiting for you. And then someone gives you a chemical designed to affect the human nervous system. You might feel dizzy. Your vision might change. Your muscles might weaken. And in some experiments, you could be exposed to substances related to nerve agents or powerful psychoactive drugs. The military called these men volunteers. But decades later, one question still hangs over the entire program. When a soldier says, yes, inside a military, with classified information and a chain of command around him, how free is that? Yes, really. This is the story of the Edgewood Arsenal human experiments, a secretive chapter of Cold War America in which thousands of military personnel became human test subjects. And the most disturbing part isn't simply what they were exposed to, it's what the government was trying to learn from them. After World War II, the world had changed. The United States and the Soviet Union were entering the Cold War, and both sides feared that the next major conflict could involve chemical weapons. American military scientists were particularly concerned about nerve agents. The Germans had developed nerve agents during World War II, including sarin and tauberin. The United States wanted to understand these chemicals and, more importantly, how to protect American troops if an enemy used them. That mission brought researchers to Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland, which had already become an important center for chemical warfare research. From the 1950s into the 1970s, the Army conducted classified experiments involving human volunteers. According to the Department of Defense, roughly 7,000 service members participated in the Edgewood program between 1955 and 1975, with experiments involving more than 250 different chemicals. The stated goal was defensive. Researchers wanted to know, how does the human body react? How much exposure causes symptoms? Can protective equipment stop the chemical? Can a drug counteract its effects? And how does a soldier perform when his body and mind are under the influence of a chemical agent? Those questions sound scientific, but there was a serious problem. The laboratory wasn't always using laboratory animals. Sometimes, the laboratory was using soldiers. Many of the participants were young enlisted men. Some were recruited from military installations near Edgewood. Others came from different parts of the country and other branches of the military. The Army described them as volunteers, and participants were given information about the studies. But today, informed consent is held to much stricter standards than it was during the early Cold War. And some of the experiments involved substances that could produce very noticeable and frightening effects. Among the chemicals studied were nerve agents and related compounds, including sarin, DX, and other anticholinesterase agents. There were also irritants, blistering agents, riot control substances, and various drugs. And then there was another category, one that makes this story even stranger: psychoactive chemicals. During the Cold War, American military planners were interested not only in killing or protecting against an enemy, they were also interested in incapacitation. Could a chemical make a person confused? Could it disrupt someone's ability to function? Could it interfere with a military unit? Could a substance alter behavior? Researchers therefore studied psychoactive compounds, including LSD and other hallucinogenic or mind-altering substances. The Army even conducted field testing of LSD at Fort Bragg in 1958 and Fort Benning in 1960, according to the Department of Defense's historical account. The personnel involved were described as volunteers and were medically monitored. Think about what that means. A soldier could enter a military research program expecting a normal assignment, and instead, researchers could be studying what happens when his perception of reality itself begins to change. But here's where the story becomes complicated. It would be easy to describe every participant as a helpless victim who was simply dragged into a laboratory. The historical record is more complicated than that. The government says the participants volunteered. Some were medically screened. Some received placebos. Not every participant was exposed to a chemical warfare agent. Some took part in equipment tests, performance tests, or other studies. And the purpose of much of the program was genuinely defensive, to understand chemical threats and develop better protection and treatments for American troops. But that doesn't make the program harmless, because voluntary participation doesn't automatically mean the risks were fully understood. And that distinction matters. Imagine being 20 years old. You're healthy. You're in the military. A doctor tells you the experiment is controlled. You trust the institution. You trust the uniform. And you don't know what scientists will eventually learn about the chemical you're about to receive. Some participants experienced symptoms during the experiments. Researchers recorded physical and mental reactions, measured biological changes, and studied how the chemicals affected performance. The National Academies later noted that some of these studies involved thousands of soldier volunteers and that the quality of medical care and observation would fall far short of modern standards. And there was another problem. Long-term follow-up wasn't originally planned as part of the Department of Defense studies. That meant the experiment could end long before the questions about its consequences did. Public Health VA. For years, much of this work remained classified. Then America changed. The Vietnam era brought growing public suspicion towards secret government programs. Congress began investigating military and intelligence experimentation on human beings. In 1975, congressional records revealed that the Army had conducted drug and chemical experiments involving thousands of servicemen over the preceding decades. The era of secrecy was beginning to crack. And once the public started asking questions, another question became unavoidable. What happened to the men who participated? The government eventually conducted studies into the possible long-term effects of the Edgewood exposures. The results have been debated and carefully qualified. Some official reviews did not find significant long-term health effects attributable to the exposures at the levels studied, but other researchers and veterans have pointed to the limitations of the historical follow-up data. A Department of Veterans Affairs summary notes that the long-term effects of individual chemicals were known from scientific literature, but the Edgewood test participants had generally experienced lower concentrations for shorter periods, and long-term follow-up was limited. In other words, science could tell us some things about what happened, but it could not answer every question with certainty. And for veterans trying to understand what happened to them decades earlier, uncertainty can be its own burden. Today, Edgewood Arsenal is part of the larger Aberdeen Proving Ground Complex. The Army's chemical defense mission continues in a very different regulatory environment. Human research still exists in medicine and military science, but modern human subject research operates under formal rules requiring informed consent and ethical oversight. The old Edgewood experiments belong to a different era. An era when the Cold War created an atmosphere of fear, secrecy, and urgency. An era when government researchers believed they were preparing for a chemical war that might never come. And an era when thousands of soldiers became part of that preparation. So, were these soldiers really guinea pigs? The answer isn't as simple as a headline makes it sound. They were not all secretly poisoned. They were not all unwilling participants. And the program was not created simply to hurt soldiers. It was a military research program designed largely around chemical defense. But it is equally true that human beings were deliberately exposed to potentially dangerous chemicals as part of classified military research. Thousands of service members participated. Some experienced immediate effects, and the government later had to confront difficult questions about consent, secrecy, medical monitoring, and responsibility. That's why the Edgewood story remains important. Because the real lesson isn't only about chemicals. It's about power. When an institution has classified information, scientific expertise, and authority over the people participating in its experiments, the line between volunteer and subject can become surprisingly thin. And that brings us back to the question we started with. When a soldier says, yes, how free is that? Yes, when he doesn't know everything the government knows. Maybe that's the most important question Edgewood leaves behind. Not just what happened inside those laboratories, but what rules should exist to make sure it never happens without genuine consent again. The experiments ended, but the question of trust never did.